So, Paco, we're here to talk about the famous UFO incident, also known as the Tic Tac incident, also the Nimitz incident. How did you come about this story?
Yeah. Well, it started as perhaps one of the best bar stories I ever heard in my life. My friend Dave Fravor, who I flew A6s with, we were in VA 145 together, and prior to that, we cruised on the Ranger. I was in VA 155, but we did a deployment together. And so I've known him since 1990, I think, a long time. At the time of the incident in 2004, he was the commanding officer of VFA 41, and that's a 2-seat Rhino squadron.
Mm-hmm.
And this thing happened, and nobody cared about it. There was no official investigation. There was, it just happened, and people sort of mocked him and made fun of him, and they put out a cartoon on the next day's schedule. And then that was it. Nothing happened, and then we'd be sitting in a bar, and somebody would say, "Hey, Dave, tell us the story about the UFO," and he'd tell it, and it's just this fascinating story. And it was fascinating to me because I've been flying basically my whole adult life, and one of the things people ask me is, "Have I ever seen anything weird, any UFOs or anything like that?" And I have not. I've never seen anything even remotely weird, and I've never really heard of anybody that has, except Dave. So I became the editor of Fighter Sweep in 2015, and I called him up, and I've just loved this story. So I'd been familiar with it for 7 or 8, 9 years at that point. And I called him up and I said, "Hey, Dave, I'm going to write an article about your UFO incident because I freaking love it. It's amazing."
Yeah.
And it's the only UFO story I ever heard at that point that was in any way credible and verifiable. Mm-hmm. And so he said, "Sure, and you're not going to believe this, but the ONI just left, and 11 years after the incident, they have just completed the very first investigation. Thorough, detailed, big packet of data investigation." And so I interviewed Dave to refresh myself as more of a journalist than some guy sitting at a bar, mm-hmm. and I got all the data and all the details, and through circuitous means, I got my hands on this ONI investigation, which I think now has been since revealed as an ATIP investigation, which is the actual sort of X-Files wing of the U.S. government that was researching the UFOs. And I used that document and Dave's interview to write my article, which, if anybody's interested, it's called "There I Was: the X-Files Edition." It's easy to find. It's all over Google. And that was in 2015. So it was the first serious piece of journalism about the Tic Tac incident. And to synopsize what happened, Dave and his wingman, so there's 4 people, they take off from the Nimitz, and they're going to go off and do some training off the coast of California, about 70 miles southwest of San Diego, 30 miles off the coast of Mexico, which is a traditional place where the West Coast Navy does its workup operations. And the rest of the Carrier Strike Group ships had been on station since prior to the Air Wing showing up. Mm-hmm. And on the 10th of November, 2004, the Aegis class, or the Ticonderoga class Aegis cruiser called the Princeton, which had a brand new, super sophisticated Spy 1 radar, started picking up these things falling from above its scan volume, so outer space essentially, mm-hmm. dropping into the scan volume, dropping down to the surface of the ocean very, very quickly, just in a matter of seconds, hovering for a little bit, 50 or so feet off the surface, over the same spot, mm-hmm. and then leaving at a high rate of speed. And they didn't know what it was. It was confusing the people on the Princeton. And again, I wasn't there, so what I'm telling you now is from the ATIP ONI report. Mm-hmm. They didn't know what it was. There were some wacky theories put forth. The meteorologist at one point said it could be ice crystals, ice balls falling from space or the upper atmosphere or something like that. But clearly they were confused, and it went all the way up to the commanding officer of the ship. Nobody really knew what was going on. So the air wing flies out to the Nimitz, and finally they have people that they can send out, 100 miles away to go check out this spot and these things that are coming down. So there's two groups that are initially sent out to check out this, what's come to be known as Tic Tac. The first one was the single seat F-18 Charlie Marine Corps commanding officer. So another CO was involved in this, and he is taken off a little bit before Fravor and his wingman, and he's going to go be the opposition. He's going to go be the bad guy. So he's going to be taking off early, heading south, and en route, the Princeton comes up and says, "Hey, we'd like you to go check out something that we've spotted on our radar, but we don't really know what it is." Mm-hmm. So they try not to lead the witness. They're just sending him out to look. And as he's heading in that direction, the Princeton comes up and says, "Hey, you wouldn't happen to have any weapons on board, would you?" Mm-hmm. Which is bizarre and confusing. And he says, "No." And that's an unusual question because we don't put weapons on the airplanes until we're in a combat zone. Yeah. There's no need for it. Or there's some sort of training or a missile exercise or something like that. But in general, there's no weapons on the planes during training. And as he is heading in the direction of the latitude and longitude that they asked him to go to, he spots Fravor and his wingman on his radar, but that's it. He doesn't see anything else. And then as he's approaching, he sees a 50 to 100 meter disc of disturbed water on what's otherwise a smooth ocean.
Wow.
And this is 11 o'clock in the morning on a sunny Southern California day. Sea state of 0 to 1, very flat. And he said initially it looked like, what he had heard. It looks like when something is submerging, like a ship is sinking or something going down very quickly and all the bubbles are coming up. Mm-hmm. And then his next thought was, since it was so symmetrical, he thought, well, maybe it's a submerged atoll and the waves are just kind of breaking over it. It kind of looked like that. But he didn't really think much of it. And then as he flies over, he sees Fravor and his wingman over the spot. So the Princeton asks him not to get involved. So he exits the area. But as he's leaving, he looks back over his shoulder and that disc of disturbed water is gone and there's no sign of it. It's just totally smooth again. And so that's his initial experience, and he's no longer really involved in this. Now, Fravor and his wingman essentially get the same call. They take off. "Can you go check something out for us?" They have a much more sophisticated radar, and they have helmet-mounted cueing systems, which are the more advanced helmets. Unfortunately, they didn't have any FLIRs on.
Okay. So
there's no ability to record visuals that they were picking up. And as they're heading out, they don't, again, pick up anything on their radar. Fravor sees the same, all four of them see the same disc of disturbed water. And Dave thought maybe there was something in it. Like he initially thought that an airliner had crashed into the ocean and was sort of just submerged. And so he starts to go down a little bit to check it out. And as he's going down, he sees what has now become called the Tic Tac, oriented in a north-south way, moving back and forth over this disc. So just kind of zipping around back and forth over the disc. And he sees that thing and he's like, "What the hell is that?" So as he's going down, his wingman stops at, say, 15,000 feet. And Dave continues down in a descending right-hand turn. And as he's going down, the Tic Tac starts mirroring him and coming up. It is doing exactly what he's doing, but an opposite. So it's in a ascending right-hand turn, and he's in a descending right-hand turn. And as that happens, the surface of the ocean becomes flat again. So it stops being disturbed by whatever it was. So they go around once, and Dave does a BFM maneuver, which is he turns towards the Tic Tac, and they're, say, 3,000 or 4,000 feet apart, which is very close in the air. And he's trying to come nose on. And as he's doing that, he's got this helmet-mounted cueing sight. And he's trying to slave the radar of the airplane in a dogfight mode towards this thing that he's trying to converge on. And the radar will not lock up. So it's not able to lock up on this thing. And as he's bringing his nose up to bear, it kind of orients itself at him, a little bit behind him, and then accelerates at super fast speeds down to the southeast. So they've gone all the way around. He's dug nose low to try to bring his nose to bear, not in any threatening way, but just to close the distance so that he can rendezvous. And it just, as his nose is coming up, it turns towards him and then just disappears.
Yeah, because I watched a few things online, but like apparently it's nothing like a jet, you know, being in full afterburn accelerating. It was almost like immediate, wasn't it?
It was, yeah, they'd never seen anything like it. And I'll get to the propulsion stuff later. So as they describe it, so they go back to the ship. Well, before that, they say, hey, Princeton, do you have a snap vector on this thing? And they say no. The picture's clean. So they have nothing on their radar. And as they're, you know, so they're baffled and they have no idea what they saw, but it's time, you know, they have gas and time and they're going to go do some training. But the Princeton says, hey, you're not going to believe this. That thing that we have on radar is now hovering over your assigned combat air position, your cap spot, where you're supposed to be heading to go to training at about 20,000 feet. So they start heading to their cap, but it left and they never saw it again. They never got contact, but the Princeton saw it there as they were heading in that direction. So they go back and they land on the ship and everybody's making fun of them. They go into combat information to do a debrief and, you know, the intelligence guys have tinfoil hats on, you know, they're being mocked. And if it weren't for the fact that Dave was the commanding officer of the squadron, you know, a very, very senior, high-ranking person, and that there were 3 other witnesses who were all very serious about what they saw, and the Princeton heard what was going on and had it on their radar, and the E-2, which was, the Princeton had tried to hand over control of the intercept to the E-2, but the E-2's radar couldn't hack it. It couldn't keep a lock, so they had given it back to the Princeton. But the E-2 guy stayed up and listened to the whole engagement. So there were a lot of factors and a lot of elements, both, you know, radar and human, that were involved in this incident. And so people didn't really know what to make of it. And the intelligence guy at the end of the day sent a report, and that was the end of it. Now, as Dave and his wingmen and the Wizzos were going back to the Paraloft, which is the gear locker for the squadron, the next wave of his squadron mates were heading out for training, and Dave said, hey, listen, this is what we saw. Do you guys have a FLIR on your plane? And they said, yes, we do. And he said, all right, listen, if you see something, turn your fucking tape on, because this is the craziest thing ever.
Yeah.
And so that's the video that people see, the Tic Tac video. The second wave went out, and again, it's 2 rhinos with 2 people in it each. But this time they didn't have a third airplane, so they separated, and one was going to the southern cap, and the other single ship was going to the north cap. Mm-hmm. The single ship is the one that took the video, and they're heading towards their cap, and the Wizzo was able to paint something at, say, 40 to 50 miles on his radar in a broad scan in Ridgewell Surge. But whenever he tried to lock it up, it wouldn't lock up. So he just kept it in broad scan, and it was, again, hovering right at their cap. So they're headed directly at this thing because that's where they're supposed to be going. That's their assigned latitude and longitude, and it's at 24,000 or 20,000 feet right at their cap. And as they got a little bit closer, but still pretty far away, he slaves the FLIR head at this image, or at this item, this Tic Tac. Mm-hmm. And that's the video that people see on the internet of him working the FLIR both in infrared and camera mode, trying to see if he can, get some distinguishing features on it. Mm-hmm. And I think that the thing that is important from that video, and it's, I think, 90 seconds, it's unremarkable without the story. It just looks like a white blob in the middle of a screen. But if you know what's happening, then I think it's actually quite remarkable. There is this thing that's hovering at 20-ish thousand feet over latitude and longitude over the ocean. And in infrared mode, there's no hot gas, no plume, no rotor blades, no wing, nothing. There's no cockpit. There's no windows. They wouldn't have been able to see that on the FLIR, but Dave and his witnesses didn't see any of these features. It literally looked like a 46, 50-foot oblong object that was the exterior candy coated, white, dull exterior with no distinguishing features. And as he got closer, maneuvering back and forth between camera and infrared, the object just exited to the left. And in real time, it looks like it just disappears. So if you're watching the video, it just looks, the first time you see it, it's just gone. And then when you slow the video down, you can see a little bit of it as it leaves to the left. But the acceleration rate is insane. It's really fast.
And what was the distance between, at time, when he was taking that video from the Hornet to this object, what would you say that the distance was?
It was still pretty far away. I think what they said was it started at 30 miles, and which the FLIR is not really designed to be used at that range for air. That's not what the FLIR is for. And that's, people say, why is the video so grainy? Why is it so, primitive looking? Because it's at the outer edges of its, capabilities. So, 30 miles, maybe down to 15 or something like that, which again is still pretty far for the FLIR. And then it was gone, and that's it. That is the Nimitz incident. There's no extra video. There's some rumors floating around that there's a 10-minute
I've heard about the rumors like floating around, like, the government are hiding it, but it's a very short video.
Yeah, there's nothing, and there's other rumors floating around that people were watching it live as the F-18 is engaged with the Tic Tac, and then it's maneuvering. I mean, there's it doesn't make any sense because at the time the AT FLIRs did not have the ability to transmit video live, so it was recorded and downloaded. I mean, ultimately, and today it does, but it didn't at the time, and also, the AT FLIR is not designed to be used in a dogfight. It is designed to be used as, with the airplane as a steady platform. The FLIR targets something on the ground so that, laser can designate it and a bomb can be dropped on it. It's not an air tool. So it wouldn't be able to hack pulling Gs and turning and stuff like that. That's not what the thing is for. So, I mean, those are great stories, but they're completely false. But that's it. And I think that the amazing thing about the Nimitz incident is there's a few things, actually. That it happened and all these reports were sent up. The ship's intelligence sent reports to Third Fleet. The captain of the ship, the commander of the carrier strike group, who's an admiral, they were all told about it, and they all were like, I don't know what to do with this. Let's just... we've got all this training that I know we have to do. Let's just do that because we're going on cruise, but whatever. And it never happened again. So I don't think anybody really spooled up about it. The other thing is that there are 4 people who were eyewitnesses to this maneuver with Fravor, and he's the only person I know of in recorded history who's got a little bit of a dogfight engagement with a UFO.
It's pretty impressive, isn't it?
Yeah. And if you met him, you would be like, yeah, that's the guy that would get into a dogfight with a UFO.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then there's all this other corroborating evidence. The Princeton has or had witnesses that saw this thing on radar, and the E2 was able to pick up a little bit of it, and everybody listened to the engagement as it was happening over the net. So it is a really interesting episode, and definitely needs to be talked about, but it's kind of brief. Not a whole lot happened beyond what I just described.
Yeah, because I've heard a few rumors as well. Like I've heard people say it's not true, it's true. But like people on the Princeton, the men in the black suits came down and were like, yeah, let's have a talk. But is any of that true?
No. None of it's true.
Right. Yeah. So it's just, again, rumors.
Yeah, I think, today, if something like that happened, it would be treated completely differently. But at the time, it's the first time that I think any of us really know of where something like that happened, and people were just caught flat-footed. They didn't have a protocol for dealing with a UFO engagement.
Absolutely.
And they still kind of don't. Like in 2015, and I don't know really anything about the episodes on the East Coast off the Roosevelt in 2015 with the the gimbal and the go fast videos. I don't really know anything about those. But I think the Navy, or I know that the Navy is taking it much more seriously now. So, but not in a nefarious way. They just want to know more. So it's not like they're covering up. No NDAs are signed or anything like that. It's not, Men in Black.
Yeah. Well, obviously, it's a really interesting story, but a couple of questions before we can wrap up this video. Why do you think the US Navy released the video in the first place? Was there a reason for this, do you think?
Well, so the funny thing is that Tic Tac video, the minute and a half FLIR video where it's just going back and forth, that was released like when I first heard the story in like 2007, 2008, Dave would tell the story and then he'd go, okay, go check this out on the internet. And it was on YouTube. That Tic Tac video was on YouTube.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I think the Wizzo had kept a tape and put it on YouTube and said, this is, UFO video, but there were no names. It was just something that was so bizarre.
Yeah.
And then when I wrote my article in 2015, it had been taken down. When the ONI or ATIP or whatever came and did their investigation, somehow it was taken off of YouTube. But now it's back up. So it was already out there for maybe a decade almost, not quite a decade, but a long time, many years. And then when the ONI, when somebody started taking it seriously, they took it down. So it was removed from the internet. And then I think they released it to TTSA or somebody has it now.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it was already out there.
Yeah. And the final question to wrap up, because I know our viewers are going to want to hear this question. What were your thoughts as a pilot? What do you think that UFO was?
Yeah, I don't know. It's funny, like when I first heard the story, and I have no real fascination or interest in UFOs. It's just not.
Likewise.
Yeah, it just doesn't capture me. But the fact that a really good friend of mine, had this story, at first it was just a great story. And I believed it. I just didn't put a whole lot of, mental effort into it to try and figure out what it was. And after reading the full report, it became more real and more detailed and much more layered. I don't know. Dave says that he doesn't believe it's of this world. I'll take his word for it. People, there are theories out there that it's some sort of secret government project, skunk works or something like that. I'm willing to be convinced. I haven't been convinced of that yet. I haven't seen any data or details that would make me believe that. Over the UFO thing, UFO being not of this world. I don't know. I don't know. I could go either way.
I think I'm in the same position of you. I'm not sure. I don't know what to believe. Is it man-made or is it from a different, world or whatever? But it's certainly interesting, that's for sure. But Paco, I just want to thank you very much for sharing that story. And yeah, I'm sure our viewers are going to really enjoy that. So thank you very much.
Yeah, my pleasure.